Welcome to the Norris Group Real Estate Podcast, a show committed to bringing you insights from thought leaders shaping the real estate industry. In each episode, we'll dive into conversations with industry experts and local insiders, all aimed at helping you thrive in an ever-changing real estate market, continuing the legacy that Bruce Norris created, sharing valuable knowledge, and empowering you on your real estate journey. Whether you're a seasoned pro or a newcomer, this is your go-to source for insider tips, market trends, and success strategies. Here's your host, Craig Evans.
Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. This is your host, Craig Evans. Really excited about the guest that we've got today. We've got Tony Alvarez on the show with us today. Tony, for many of those that you know him, he's a great guy. For many of those you don't, let me tell you a little about him real quick. He's a real estate investor and a mentor. Tony's a well-heeled, seasoned, and knowledgeable, successful real estate investor, a licensed broker, developer, and certified general appraiser. He's lived and worked in the real estate business since 1981. Tony has built, purchased, rehabbed, rented, and sold hundreds of properties, from vacant land to condos, single-family residences, apartments, and commercial properties, and is well-versed in the risks and requirements for success inherent in different types of real estate investments. Tony's also a sought-after speaker and has previously spoken at the Norris Group's Multi-Millionaire Maker in 2005 and 2006, as well as other real estate investment clubs and events throughout Southern California. Tony, good to have you, my friend. How are you today?
That guy, he sounds so interesting. I can't wait to meet him. I mean, it's an amazing thing. I'm very well, thank you very much, and it's wonderful to see you, and it's wonderful to see you doing this.
It's been an exciting transition, and I am looking forward to years of continued success through the Norris Group and carrying on a legacy that obviously Bruce Norris set and Aaron set, and I am honored to be kind of carrying that mantle coming in behind him. But I'm going to jump in. You've been on the radio show with Bruce countless times. I don't know. I think it's like 14 or 15 times.
No, I don't know about that, but it's been several. Yeah.
There's been stories and memories following Bruce and his teaching. And today what I want to do is I want to try to take a different journey because, I've listened to some of those and you and Bruce dive in and you're going to specifics about real estate and we're going to do some of that. We're going to do a lot of that today, but I want to take a little different journey through the story of Tony. I hope that if you're okay with this, I want to go through some of the things that maybe investors haven't heard and introduce you to our new expanded audiences, if that's okay.
Sure.
So with that, I'm going to give a little background. So you came to us, and correct me as I'm going through this, you came to us, to America from Cuba,
right,
with your parents. So tell me a little bit about that experience and getting to the States.
Okay, so that's taken us way back. I did not think about real estate back then. Okay, so, but I understand what you're doing. You're looking for the foundation of an investor. Like what ends up, what's behind it, right? So back then, this is during the Castro Revolution, right? Back in 1960, I think is when we came to the United States. And my father was an attorney. My mom was a teacher in Cuba, and of course, they were in the mix, so to speak, in the political mix, and they kind of ahead of what was going on. And my mom was actually friends with Fidel Castro when they were younger. They actually went to the same school and stuff like that.
Really?
Yes, yeah. It was and Fidel would come to visit to the house when we were young, and my older brother used to play with his rifle. He had a rifle that he always carried with him. I don't know, it was an M1 rifle or something. He would put it at the door wherever whenever he came in his fatigues, his uniform, and all that. And that's how they kind of that precipitated my parents deciding to get the heck out of Cuba. Because my parents were in a financial sense. Our family was well off. Like we all had nannies and stuff like that. It wasn't, we were slightly above the middle class over there. Because my dad was an attorney, my grandfather, his dad was a judge, and they both worked in the same courtroom. My dad was working as a clerk of course at the time, and he worked right under my grandfather. And it was a large family. They had 12 brothers and sisters, and my dad probably by noontime, he was at the racetrack or something with my mom. They were, they didn't. There wasn't a lot of work involved in the. So, but his younger brother, because when Castro took over, he did a couple of things right away. Once he picked up all the weapons because he said you're not going to need them anymore because we're going to protect you. And then, does that sound familiar? But second, he said, he instilled a military training program, and if you reach a certain age, the kids, they, like if you were 13, 12, whatever the heck it was, you got inducted into the military and you went away for a certain amount of time and you came back and, you were pretty much brainwashed. So my dad's younger brother got taken away. And when he came back, they had a party for him. And at the party, he was talking about the revolution, this revolution, that. And my dad said to him, they got alone. My dad was the oldest in the family. And when they were alone in the room, he said, you can stop all that revolution. It's just you and me now, And he turned to my dad and he said, if you ever say anything like that to me again, I'll turn you in. I'll have everyone in your kids and everybody shot. So my dad went home that night and he told my mom, okay, this is insanity, And so they decided, that to get out. So you couldn't you couldn't take anything from Cuba. You had, you just took the clothes on your back and it was a miracle to get out. But at that time, Castro was still wanting to look politically, good and stuff. So he was letting people go, hey, you guys want to leave? So all the professionals really were the ones that were leaving at the time, because the folks that weren't as well educated and stuff, they believed in the dream that he was selling them. You're all going to own, everyone is going to be the same, you're all going to have everything, So, but we saw a lot of things. I was 5 years old, and I saw a lot of things in the streets. That kids should not be witness to at a young age. But it's it was like a war zone, basically. So yeah. So we land in the United States, and you get here, right? And the first thing they do, they talk about internment camps, and everybody. So well, we landed in Miami, and the first thing they do, women and children over here. All the men over here, because they don't know if you're communist, if you're socialist, they don't know, right? So they had this place that was chained up, they had a chain link fence around it, and my dad gets put in there, and I don't remember because I was young, but I remember we would go visit him, right? And my dad was happy as a lark, okay? He's inside this internment camp, there were tents set up, and he's looking at my mother, he's like, hey, I'm over here, look who's here. It's the baker guy from the corner street bakery, and yeah, because all the guys, So, yeah, it was a strange time, but it was a good time. And of course, all of the foundation of who I am comes from that, to a large extent, from that time. And then everything else, we went to Catholic school. The Catholic Church helped us a lot. My dad didn't even want us to stay in Miami. My dad went from being an attorney in Cuba, with basically didn't do much of anything, lands in Florida. His first job is dishwasher at the Fontainebleau hotel in Miami Beach at the time. And then he worked at another place called El Carrillon, which is it's right near it, another big hotel like that. And the first type of meat or protein that we ate at home came as, people would go there and eat. And if they didn't finish their steak, my dad's picking it up when they bust the tables or whatnot and cleaning it up and bringing it home, that kind of thing. So we went through challenges, and we did everything. We sold fruits on the street corner. I mean, they were trying to get ahead. So we did everything. And then we end up in Lawrence, Massachusetts, a small mill town, because there was a priest there, at the Catholic Church who spoke Spanish. He was the only one in the city, basically, who spoke Spanish. And we were the first Cubans to land there. So we got on a Greyhound bus, and the only words my dad knew how to say in English, and these are things stories he's told over the years, was cup of coffee, apple pie. So that is all we ate the whole trip. Everybody, every place we stopped, cup of coffee, apple pie. That's it.
Yeah.
But
So was that his language, or was that his getting his priorities right?
yeah. Well, he says that was it. He says he even tells the story about at one of the stops, the Greyhound bus stop. People get off, someone get on, and this lady gets on, and she hears us speaking Spanish. So she says, "Oh, you're Spanish. I can tell you from your accent. You're Cubans." Oh yeah, she was Cuban and this and that. And my dad, she says something to someone else in what he interprets things as English, and he's thinking, we're going to eat good at the next stop. She's going to order for us. We're going to. So he invites her. He invites her to eat with us, right? And when we stop at the place, he says, "Okay, they come to order," and it's like, "Okay, she's going to order," And the lady goes, "I don't speak English." So my dad, he says, I looked at the waiter and went, "Cup of coffee, apple pie." But
Oh,
okay, all right. So when you land in a small town and you're the first Spanish-speaking people, in the meantime, you got to understand what this was: missile crisis, all this stuff.
that was like
They-
free flights and stuff at that time, right?
right? Yes, and kids are getting, and every so often they have an alarm in the school, and the kids are getting under their desks. So this is going to protect you from a nuclear missile or something. But it gave us a sense of power, right? Of control over our lives. So they're doing all of this because there's a lot of scary talk on TV and stuff. And at the same time, they're walking us in and going, "Hi, these are your new friends from Cuba." So the kids are like,
So
so
you didn't get picked first for kickball then, right?
no, well, only as the ball. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So, but it's, over time, all of that changed, and quite frankly, all those kids that were afraid of us and didn't understand us, they all became. I have such good friends from my early years in school. I still go back. I try to get back to a yearly reunion that we have an 8th grade reunion out of that Holy Rosary Catholic School, and I love all of those. I call them kids. We're all in our 60s now, but
Right.
it was a great time for us, and it was a great time. I'm so happy that I grew up where I grew up, around the people that I grew up, and that we experienced everything that happened. I really tell you that the older I've gotten, the more I realize the level of resilience that my brothers have. It was really instilled in us as a result of the hits we took along the way, that that you can interpret as unwanted situations and unwanted just conditions, right? But I mean, our first place to live was a place called the International Institute. We had a 10 by 10 room, and this is in Massachusetts, right? I'm not it was a similar thing in Miami, but when we got to Massachusetts, because the Catholic Church got us the thing, it's in a really much a boarding house. You have a 10 by 10 room. You have a common bathroom down the hallway, common kitchen downstairs. You got certain time that you can cook, and if you miss it, you're not eating anything cooked. And then we had an alleyway in the back, of our place that was, where it was our playground. And first winter, we have the largest snowstorm in New England. We'd never seen snow, and my dad thought we were going to die. He said, "You have it's like 4 feet of snow. You can't drive in it. But
So let
we
me.
thought it was great.
Was this your entire family in a 10 by 10?
It was my mom, my dad, my grandmother, my mother's mom, who came with us, and then my older brother, my younger brother, and myself. And then we have another brother who was older than us, but was not allowed to leave because of that military restraint stuff. It was more difficult to get him out. He did
Right.
follow us, though. He did come. And then my little sister was born here, and we named her the Anchor Baby because my dad. It was an accident. She wasn't supposed to. But my dad says it was a godsend because he was worried about we were going to get sent back any minute, right? Any minute they're gonna go. Okay, all these Cubans out of here, and. And so he said, "Okay, now we got one that's an American citizen. we're okay. She can claim all of us, So yeah, so that's your life revolves around these concerns that the typical American is totally oblivious to. You don't know now. But I want to make one thing clear as I tell these stories. I'm telling you, I wholeheartedly support things like vetting and stuff like that. I do not support anything any different than what we went through when we landed in this country, because in my opinion, it's a lack of respect for the rule of law and a lack of respect for the sovereignty of this country, which is really what we embrace. Why the hell do you think we came here? Why didn't we go to China? I mean, you know, we could have gone somewhere else. We could have gone to some other and a lot of Cubans did. Spain, a lot of different places. We were blessed to land where we did when we did. So yeah.
So let me ask you, and how you're telling me, because listen, Tony, you and I have spent some time together, and you know a little bit of my story. Coming from Middle Georgia and South Georgia. I mean, obviously, you're growing up and the moving and coming from, that's a whole lot different than what I experienced in South Georgia process. So with that kind of growth, and I, my dad was the baby of 9, so it's interesting to see people's growth patterns and processes through life. But when you're coming to America, you're starting in Miami. Now you're in Massachusetts. There's, by my count of you, I think it total by the time your sister got here, was born, that made 8 in a 10 by 10 room.
Well, no, because things change. So we started out there, right? And all of our clothes, I've got some pictures. If I knew, honest to goodness, if we were going to go in this, I would have shown you some pictures. There's all of the clothes that we wore were clothes for adults. But downstairs in the basement of that International Institute where we were living, they had a room. And it was full of donated clothes. Now, because the Catholic Church ran all of this.
Sure.
Right? So all of these coats and jackets and things, hats with ear, it's like the old pilot, hats with that you pull the thing. And we've got some pictures where my brothers and I are standing and with my parents and stuff, and we're standing looking at, we're looking out at what's happening, and it's like we look strange, man. We look like we didn't, we were, buttons are all missing and and we smelled like mothballs. I mean, that's the only thing. It was mothballs everywhere. So yeah, but over time, my parents immediately landed work in the factories. Now the factories paid more. I'm trying to remember. I remember because I ended up working in those same mills. It was a mill town, and
Yep.
As a matter of fact, I worked at a place called Malden Mills, and now, we start moving out. In other words, they help us find an apartment. Now, I want you to know, you got to think about this, because I just mentioned this is during the Castro Revolution, missile crisis. The news on TV and everywhere is about a potential missile that could land here any moment. Here's a group of Cubans, and we're trying to find a place to rent. Right? So we're the only Cubans in this town. No one speaks Spanish except the Father Natali, the Italian priest, because our city, by the way, talk about different times. The city was broken down between the Irish community and the Italian community. We landed in the Italian community, but it was by that time, even though they still had the churches and stuff, and everybody, we had Irish kids, Italian kids, French kids. I mean, it was, we all went to school together, but they still had these 2 separate parts of town. So we ended up in the Italian part because of Father Natali. He's the pastor of the Italian church, and he gets all this done for us. Gets my mom and dad jobs at the mills, and finds us a place to live. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, there's three boys: my mom, my dad, and my grandmother. And he says, here's a place. These are people we know. Go to them, talk to them, and that Father Natali is going to go. And my mom is telling us, okay, only your brother comes with me. The rest of you hide. We don't want these people looking at all these folks. I'm going with and then she used to say to us, because after that we would go with her to see the nuns and all. Because my mom cut a deal with the pastor of the church. This is when I start seeing negotiating to let us attend Catholic school as long as And she will trade cleaning and cooking for the convent, and stuff like that. So my mom was really involved in that. Oh, and she also taught them that she would do physical fitness classes. Now my mom was a little heavy set,
Right.
And to this day, I have a friend, Louis Grasso, who we get together, and he says he'll call me once in a while. He'll go, "Do you remember your mom? She's kind of chunky, trying to make us do jumping jacks." And then we were trying not to laugh because we didn't want to be disrespectful, but it was hilarious. And so my mom, but my mom convinced, and she told the priest that he needed to have, physical fitness classes because it was embarrassing that he had the best Catholic school in the city, and yet they didn't provide physical fitness, classes for the kids. But yet in Cuba, which is it was basically a third world country, that they had all the schools had physical fitness. So how could you do that? Aren't you ashamed? So the priest, I mean, right away, he's like hired her immediately. Well, yeah, we'll trade. We'll do. That's great. That's great. So I got to see a lot of that stuff. And then my mom, my mom and my dad were the two most influential people in my life. That still hasn't changed. My mom was all about relationships, getting to know everyone in town. We knew the mayor. We knew that everyone, we knew all the cops. We used to get driven, if we were walking, my brothers and I, and the cop and a cruiser went by, they go, whoop, and then we knew all the cops. I used to save my money, okay, my 5 cents, and I used to go to Dunkin' Donuts, buy them coffee. I learned what all the detectives drank, and I would show up with a little tray, right? A little tray, and the guy, I never forget it, there's a guy at the front door, he looks at me, and he goes, "Who the hell are you?" And there's a guy behind him, right, like a sergeant. He goes, "That's Alvarez. Let him in. He's going upstairs." He goes, "What do you mean, let him in?" He goes, "He just buzz the door. The kid knows. He knows the detective's upstairs. He gets buzz him in." And yeah, and I would go upstairs, and from that it turned out I wanted to be a cop, and then so I would go upstairs, bring them their coffee. They go, "You trying to poison us? Let's handcuff him. Yeah, we can't trust this Cuban." So I grew up, around people that Easterners have a very different sense of humor, and they love you, but at the same time, they if they're not ribbing you, if they're not teasing you, if they're not jacking you up somehow, then you're not important to them. You're off their scope.
Right.
So I grew up with some magnificent people, and I mean, and Easterners are known for their vulgarity and their conversation. It's one of the reasons I love to watch mobster movies. I hate to admit it, even though this is kind of like, it's kind of like you're saying, well, you're labeling people. No, it was in the attitude of the people. Hey, how you doing? I'm so happy that I grew up there. All of that experience, all of it. Slowly, we did better till my parents finally were able to. We had a landlord, Mr. Folletti, big Italian man, would come collect his rent. By the way, where we lived, you paid your rent on a weekly basis, not monthly, weekly. So he would come by. My mother would make him espresso coffee. He would sit with us at the table. We'd all get around him. We loved him. Okay, he would sit with us. And he loved up my mom's stories and my dad's stories because my mom now, by that time, they're speaking broken English, and they learned quick. They didn't mess around. And we were not allowed to speak Spanish outside the house. You spoke Spanish at home, outside you spoke English. And God help us if my dad caught my brothers one of us talking Spanish to each other out in the yard, God, you forget it. You're going to pay the price. And so we learned quickly. That is why I don't talk like this. Okay.
Yep.
Yes, this was not allowed in the house. You don't talk like this. This is not the way you talk. You speak English like you speak English. And when we speak Spanish, we don't have any accent, any English accent either. We speak the language clearly. So, and that takes effort, and that takes your dad chasing you around with a belt. That's what it takes.
Thinking, have you ever thought about doing a career in voiceovers?
You know what? You say that? I did voices. I did voices Not for I wanted to go, to be honest with you, I wanted to go into show business as a young man, which is one of the reasons why I came out to California to begin with. But I got married young and I had a son. But my son was the beneficiary of my entertainment value. I entertained my son since he was a little guy, did all voices. What does my son decide to go into? Acting and voices. My son just finished a movie for Ron Howard in Australia. Yes, and my son went into voice. My son came to me one day. He said, "I want to go into acting, Dad." I said, I almost put him in therapy because I thought there's something wrong with him. I wanted him to go into business, real estate and stuff. And he didn't want it. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. But I had done the voices. There wasn't a day that we got into a car to go drive somewhere where we didn't get in, and I became, it was a race car. And okay, and here they are, ready at the races, and I would do all these voices. Every time we went past someone, if we looked in and it was someone from Asia, I would do an Asian accent. If it was, African, and I'm telling you the truth, if it was African American, if it was this or that, and I would pretend that there's a Russian guy, I would do a Russian accent. So my son had an impact on him, and he went into that business, and he does extremely well. He's living in Australia now. He actually moved. He married an Aussie, and they've got a couple kids, and they're all in show business, and that's exactly what he does. But he hates real estate. He didn't even want to inherit any of the stuff. I said, you got to learn this business because you're going to inherit all this stuff. Nah, Dad, I don't want any. You donate it to your whatever you want or whatever. His wife, on the other hand, she called me up after that conversation. She goes, "You forget what he said."
My daughter, Georgia, you met her the last time you were here.
Yes, I did. Yes, very nice. Yeah,
she has a massive phobia of frogs.
Okay.
She had a frog that literally, when she was like 4 or 5, jumped on her mouth at an outdoor party and landed and right on her mouth. And we went to pull it off, and it's stuck to her face. But I have heard through the rumor mill that you've got an interesting story about frogs.
Well, no, it has to do with my parents again. As a matter of fact, most of the stuff that has had an impact on my life has been as a result of my parents. And so my mom, that's the one thing, if we never lack for what to get my mom for whatever, birthday, whatever. It's always going to be something frog related. And this started many, many, many years ago. There's certain things that my mother just inculcated into our thinking. Not that we have a tremendous love of frogs, any of my brothers are, but that, my mom would have all these frogs around all the time. And so we knew, what are you getting Mom for Christmas? I'm getting her, I found this frog thing, or the stuffed animal frog, or this set of frog dishes or cups or whatever. I'm like, Mom, what's with the frog thing? What. So she educated us that basically a frog is the only creature that doesn't go in reverse. It can only go forward. That my mom used that basically as an instruction to us that always when you encounter something, whatever it is in your life, and this was usually as a result of us having a problem, we're sitting around moping, and my mom is walking and going, "Listen, if a frog can go forward 100% of the time, I think you can handle this. Okay, move forward. Don't, there's nothing to go. What you're going to retreat here. So that became, I can't see a frog without remembering that. Now over the years, I've instilled that in my son and in my grandkids. That story has come up, to kind of, because it's so easy, you say a little story like that, and I can't begin to tell you how many times in my life when I've been confronted with something that scares me, some scary time or something where I say, okay, I'm done. I'm not, especially when I crashed and burned in real estate. I said, that's it. I'm going to go do something else. I ended up making pizzas at Shakey's, and you're getting up every day, and all you got to do is see a freaking frog, excuse me. and that's all you think about. You're thinking about, God, my mother, she's like, so, but just like everything else, my mom used to say to us, and my mom used to do this, and she did this almost on a daily basis. Before we left the house, she would say to us, in this life, you can meet anyone, no matter how important, or how wealthy or whatever, or how famous they are. You can meet and become friends with anybody. And then she always would say, as long as you learn to love people first. I guess the bottom line is that my mom instilled in us an overall sensation of gratitude.
So the next time you're down, that means you're bringing something. I hope it's that you're bringing a frog to my daughter. I've got a sneaky question that I want to get into.
Okay, go ahead.
I've heard something that I need to clarify, and I think especially to newer audiences to the Norse Group, and in those that have heard you speak over and over.
Yeah,
I need to know, because I've heard through the grapevine that you actually got into real estate because of late night infomercials. Is that true?
Yeah, and then and this goes to the heart of things. Okay, so I'm a young guy, right? I'm in my 20s. I'm already married, and I have a son. And I dropped out of high school. I was very rebellious at that age, and I dropped out of high school. I was going to high school, and I was working the second shift at Malden Mills, because we all had to chip in and help my dad and stuff. And my dad really wasn't pushing us to continue with education stuff. At that time, we were worried about money, to be honest, supporting everything. And, so what happens is I'm, now in my early 20s and stuff. I'm stressed out because the only jobs I can get are basically janitorial services or construction. And guess what? Tony doesn't like to get his hands dirty. So I'm in trouble. Okay. So I'm sitting up watching TV one night, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And here comes this guy. I changed the channel, and I never forget it, because it was 2:00 in the morning, and it's Dave Delgado. This guy, one of the guys that was, banging his tambourine on the real estate circuit back in the 70s or whatever. And he says, right out of the gate, he's in a white suit. They're in Hawaii. You see the beach behind them. It's beautiful, and it caught my attention because I was so depressed, really. I was down and out. And he's sitting there on one of those, like a studio chair, like they have like for the studio producers and stuff when they're sitting around, filming. And he's got another guy with him. And he says, look, you don't need any idiot, he says. Any idiot can get wealthy in real estate. And right around that time, I was identifying myself as an idiot because I didn't really have much to look forward to. And he said, you don't need a high school diploma. That got my attention. You don't need money. I didn't have any. You don't need good credit. My credit was horrible. You don't need past experience, and you don't need contacts or connections. I have never forgotten those 5 things. That listed out my resume. And I remember thinking to myself, because I have a weird sense of humor, I remember thinking, I'm an investor and I didn't even know it. I got everything he says I'm supposed to have. I don't need any of these things. I qualify for this. Okay, so how much I'm so stupid. I'm running to the phone to order this guy's course. I haven't even heard another word out of this thing. Oh, no, that's not true. He turns to the guy next to him, happens to be from New England, from Massachusetts. He's a plumber. Now, I want you to know, in Massachusetts, a plumber is like, he's like God, okay? And they make as much money as they want. But the guy says, yeah, I know. I'm a plumber in Massachusetts. A lot of you are thinking, no, this guy's got money. He said, but I was tired of being on my knees in the middle of the winter, unplugging somebody's toilet or whatever. He says, I'm done with that. I listened to what Dave told me to do. And, after doing what he said here, and he holds up a check. And the check is for $12,000. Now, the last job I had, I was getting paid between $900 and $1,000 a month. So this guy is holding my yearly salary in one transaction. Done. I'm on the phone, and he's from Massachusetts. So and when the guy starts talking about this, when he gets to the check, he goes, I did whatever he told me to do. And he said, and here's what I mean. And he gets emotional. Okay. When he got emotional, I'll be honest with you, I started crying. I'm by myself and I'm crying. I'm getting emotional with this guy on the thing because I'm connecting with him, or he's connecting with me, better said. He hit me where I was living at the moment. And I went, Dave Delgado, that's it. And he had an Italian name to begin with. So I felt like we're close, right? So So I go and I go to the thing. I get the, I order the course, and it was like $49 or something, 69. I forget what the heck it was, but within a couple of weeks, I get a box of books and cassette tapes. That's what we had back then. I think I read 2 chapters in a book, and I listened to a few cassette tapes. I'm out looking for a house to buy, and I landed my first deal. Of course, I had to talk my parents into providing the signature for the financing, not the actual money, but securing, because they had great credit.
Right.
And I found a fixer-upper, and I found a real estate agent, that was right around the corner from where I was, and he took me to see this house. And I took my mother with me, and I never forget it, and I tell the story all the time, because I'm walking into this house, and it's an old house. I drive by it, by the way, every time I go to Southern California. I go to Burbank and I drive by this house, okay? Because I can't believe it's worth like $900,000 now, okay? And the guy hasn't changed a damn thing, okay? I think he's painted it, whatever. And he removed the avocado tree I planted in the front and my son's orange tree from the back. Yeah, the 2 things he did immediately. But anyways, so we're walking in, and the guy opens the door, and there's pigeons fly. There's no windows. There's birds flying out, And my mother turns to the guy right away, and he says, "You're trying to steal my son's money," because the house was a disaster. And the guy goes, "No." And I said, "Ma, he's not stealing anybody's money. He says, it's a fixer-upper. It's what it is. This is not good for you. I'm telling you, this house is a disaster." And so she's basically, what is she doing? She was negotiating. She's trying to, like the guy doesn't know it's a fixer-upper.
Right.
So and that guy did something for me. We really have to pay attention to every single moment, every single word. If you're gonna go in any direction, but in life in general, because things happen right in front of you, and if you're not awake, you're gonna miss it. And this guy, I'm standing out in front of this house looking at it. My mother's inside walking around still. I'm petrified because I've never done a transaction. This guy walks up to me. The agent puts his hand on my shoulder, and he had a beautiful Mercedes, dressed really well. He puts his hand on my shoulder, which later, by the way, I found out that's something they call anchoring or something, where they do, and then they tell you to do something. And he put his hand on my shoulder, and he goes, "You better buy this house because this is really a good deal." And he squeezed my thing twice, and it was $78,000, okay, for that house. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, built in 1930, and I immediately, this is the effect that moment had on me. I didn't know if that was a good deal, but I realized that's the most important part of this business. I got to learn value. That led me to go and find out about appraising, which I did not know existed. I wanted to learn. How do you learn to identify value quickly? Because I realized I have to have that skill. And I learned about real estate appraisers, and then back then you didn't even have licensing. You just went to work for another appraiser. I immediately found a lady who, as a result of another friend, who was an appraiser in Beverly Hills. She worked the West Side, bigger, beautiful, all the stars homes and stuff. She used to dress up, high heels and all that. She didn't want to get dirty measuring their 6,000 square foot mansion. So she cut a deal with me. "Will you measure the house while I go and do the interior inspection?" She says, "If you do that, I'll train you. You can work with me. I'll train you, and then I'll start handing you appraisals, and you can start that way." Done. I was at the next job with my measuring tape and the thing. And, yeah, and that's how I get into appraising, and that taught me about values. And I, over time, because my mom taught us about relationship building. She taught us to love people and love to meet people and love to connect with them and learn about them, and because there's something to learn. You'll learn something about that person's life that'll make you better at whatever you're doing than you're doing it now. But you have to be open to life. My dad we'd be sitting at the dinner table, and I love to eat. So, and my mom made fresh cooked meals. My mom would get home from the mills, right, from the factory job, and she would cook a full on from scratch, rice and beans and roasted chicken and whatever. Everything for us was about the food, okay, because we didn't have a lot. So everything was bought at the store, made from scratch. So we're eating, and my brother, starts getting a piece of chicken, and I'm looking at his plate, and I would get whack. What? Keep your eyes on your own plate. What your brother's getting is none of your business. So from that, okay, but that's a specific mindset. Okay, that's an example. But my dad was about focus your attention on what you're doing, whether it was shoveling snow or helping out in some other way. Get your eyes on what you're doing. You're not going to get any better at it by looking at somebody else. Focus your attention on on exactly what you're doing.
So let me ask you then.
Yeah.
Out of that, because Tony, I was excited that you agreed to come on, because I could sit and listen to you, and not just the stories, but what you pull and garner out of them. So I want to ask a question here. So you're watching Dave Delgado, middle of the night, you buy his tapes. Here you are. Here's this guy, crying. This is what he did for me, right?
Right.
You go and you realize your first deal, it's not as easy to become the millionaire as you thought it was, right?
Right.
You quickly pivoted into appraising and finding value.
Right.
So how much credibility do you think that being an appraiser and understanding value, right? How do you think that, how much credibility did that give you once you really got in as an investor, to starting out compared to where you are now? Because we just talked about focus, and I'm interested in that.
Well, okay. So the main thing is probably the steam behind the level of desire that I had was that what Dave Delgado did for me that night. Okay, let me back up a second. I hope that by now, anyone who's been listening to me has garnered the fact that we were sharpened like a tool early on by our life experiences. I mean, you don't have to come to this country as an immigrant to become successful. But I want you all to pay attention, especially you out there that are not immigrants. Look at how many of them do become successful. And It's because they have a love of the things that this country offers. We don't take it for granted.
Right.
So my dad's foot sharper, he's telling us, focus your attention where you want it to be. Don't be looking at somebody else as anything. My mom is like, you better learn to love people, because the only way you're going to get better at whatever you do is you got to meet other people. You got to know what they're about. You got to get curious about life. Those are fundamental things to succeeding. Now, if you don't understand that, you better pay attention to, look at the guy who started Amazon, Amazon. Look at the guy who invented this Apple phone, and go read their life stories. You know what you're going to find? You're going to find those exact things in their foundation. Okay? It's not any different. Why didn't Tony invent Amazon? I don't know. I'd like to find out for myself. But I got my life to a certain level of success where I'm happy with it. I don't need any more than that, and I'm cool. So those things are a part of the foundation. I'm down and out. Here comes Dave Delgado. Dave Delgado says, "Hey, by the way, I don't know why you're feeling down. This was the message that he sent to me. Any idiot can do this. Why are you sitting there, like your world is ending? You just got to pay attention up until that moment, I didn't know anything about real estate, honestly, except for one thing. Earlier, I told you, Mr. Folletti used to come to collect his rent on a weekly basis. We used to get around him. My mom would make him espresso. You know what he told us early on? I'm going to tell you boys something you need to listen. In this country, you're never going to get rich by working for somebody else. You needed to own a real estate, and you needed to own it as soon as possible. He ended up convincing my parents to buy the 3-tenement building that we lived in, and he carried the mortgage, zero money down. That was the first zero down deal that I ever witnessed. And we all, my dad and my mom, since the revolution, since Cuba, their attitude was, everyone in the family, we didn't keep things from each other. My parents, if they were suffering over something, we all suffered. We all knew about it. It was like a massive, you can either call it a support group or dysfunctional, which is what they call it nowadays. Right? You're a dysfunctional family. Well, I'll tell you what, we had no secrets. Everyone knew. If my dad got a raise, if my dad went to the track, by the way, and he lost later on, we'd all know about it. Just like we knew if he won, he would come home at 11 o'clock at night and he's waking us all up, or we How did we buy the second tenement, the second 3 tenement? I'm going to tell you honestly, my dad was excellent with numbers, and he actually won at the track, came home, and he had like $2,000 he had won. That bought us the triplex across the street. My dad started in the business early on, but he didn't hang with it. He didn't stay with it. He actually, went off, and he didn't take it as a business. He thought he was blessed just to be able to do what he did. So that's where Tony, I believed what Dave Delgado told me. Now, this is important. I would just want to interject this. That night, Dave Delgado did 2 things for me, because over time, and quite frankly, it was Bruce Norris who said to me, "Why did you become successful one time?" And then I had to go home and think about it, because I had never thought about that question. You're just living your life, doing your stuff. I don't hang around going, "Oh, I wonder how I got successful." It's just stupid. I'm just, hard work is where I would land, right? So I realized Dave Delgado had 2 things he did. Number one, the way he laid out his marketing in front of me right then and there, the guy from Massachusetts, all of those things lined up in a certain way. I believed it was possible. I believed real estate can make any idiot wealthy. I bought into it. Number 2, I didn't only believe it was possible, I believed it was possible for me. Those 2 things are huge in any endeavor. You have to believe it's possible, especially if you've never done it. But you have to believe it's possible for you, because it may be possible. Oh yeah, it's possible it's possible for Craig Evans. It's possible for Bruce Norris. It's possible for somebody else, for Joey. It's possible. Oh, why? Because they were born here. Oh, because they've got a college education. Oh, because they've got this or that. They got money. If you can convince someone of those 2 things, get out of their way, because they will roll over you. They will steamroll over you, which I just told you. I listened to half a tape, but 2 tapes, and a couple of chapters in a book. I went out convinced. I'm convinced there's no one that's going to stop me from doing this. And if you think I wasn't convinced, you know what it is to get an old Cuban guy who came from Cuba, who has worked at all these menial jobs, to sign on a loan for you, even if you are his son, which, by the way, he didn't have that great opinion of my level of intelligence at the time. I was supposed to be the dumbest guy in our family, which my dad would say to me every so often, out of love, "You're not too smart, okay? Your brothers, they're going to be okay. But you're not the brightest bulb in this family. You need to stay at the factory, okay?"
All right, everybody. Well, Tony, I really appreciate you being with us today. That's going to do it for part 1. We'll catch you next week.
All right. Thank you.
For more information on hard money loans, trust deed investing, and upcoming events with the Norris Group, check out thenorrisgroup.com. For more information on passive investing through the DBL Capital Real Estate Investment Fund, please visit dblcapital.com.
The Norris Group originates and services loans in California and Florida under the California DRE license 01219911, Florida Mortgage Lender license 1577, and NMLS license 1623669. For more information on hard money lending, go to thenorrisgroup.com and click the hard money tab.